Welcome to the show, Anthony, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm pretty good. Yourself, Donald. Thank you for having me.
Hey, no problem, man. Hey, if you don't mind, let's dig into a little bit of your background, man. What brought you to the Air Force?
Yeah. When I was 17, my senior year in high school, there, about to turn 18, I get the typical talk from the dad, like, hey, like, you're at that age, son. It's time to get a job, go to college, or get out. And at the time, I hadn't really no drive, and I didn't want to go to college, didn't want to get a normal job. And long story short, I talked to a Navy recruiter, talked about being on a boat for 6 months, and then an Army recruiter decided that wasn't for me. And then my dad was in the Air Force prior, and he was down in Tampa at MacDill for like 4 years, and he talked to me about quality of life of the Air Force, TY golf clubs, all that stuff. And then I decided to join on July 18th of 2000 there, and then I get to we'll say my first 10 years in the Air Force. My first 5 years I was a weapons loader there at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, where I started out. And then I actually joined, prior to 9/11. So that happened while I was there. And then, through the process there, throughout time, I decided, okay, man, well, like, I want to be a firefighter. What's different in those guys' DNA for the 343 that ran in that building that day, versus everybody else. And, I spent the next 5 years of my career being an Air Force firefighter, aircraft fire and rescue there at Charleston Air Force Base. And then I get to a point of fork in the road again where, like, I'm at home on leave with some friends, and I'm basically realized I've done nothing, in my eyes as far as the global war on terror goes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to this pizza place, and I see the same cracks in the road at that point. And I realized, man, I don't want to leave cracks. Like, I want to leave craters. We can't take nothing with us when we leave. And basically, the only thing you can take with you is how you're remembered, as a legacy, if you will. And at that point, decided to join the mighty 16th Special Operations Squadron here at Cannon Air Force Base and flying the Spectre gunship.
Okay.
And then, I do that for a while. Then I go to the Payvoc helicopters there, the rescue squadron at Moody. And then that's where I, saw, on one mission, the best and worst side of combat search and rescue. And, I ended up getting help in the end, my last year of career, and started the prolonged exposure treatment. And then that's when the lady encouraged me to, you should write your story. I said no like 100 times. And then finally, when I got out, when the dust settles, that sense of purpose is real. Like, maybe I can pay it forward. Maybe someone will get help from this. So that's when I decided to put words on paper. So,
yeah, I mean, the tasks that you took on were not easy tasks. I mean, even being firefighting in the military, man, it's not like it is outside the world. It's a different ball game, and you're dealing with, ammo points and everything else that, you have to train for, especially like Navy, and then going into the aviation side, man, that's, not exactly the safest side of the house either. So,
yeah, that's very true. I think, in the end, we're all very normal men and women doing very, unordinary, uncommon things, and not to sound cliche, but, after 2 decades of war, I think it's not if, it's when someone gets to that point where they're going to have to take that tactical knee or whatever the case may be. You know your limits, and, that accountability mirror, when you talk to it, like, man, like, I do need help. I do have a problem, and I'm a better man for getting help, so.
Yeah, me too. I 100% agree with you. And you are 100% correct. My first deployment was 2002, February of 2002. And the first casualty we took was 2005, June 28, 2005. And so in that time frame, of constantly deploying, I was on the Army side, special ops side. Yeah. And I'm not going to say it was complacency, but you just get to the point where it becomes a job. You get up, you go deploy, you come home, and you don't think that anything's going to happen to anybody else. We're just too good, and that rude awakening when it does happen is tough.
Yeah, it's I had a realization, when I don't know about you, man, but when I did my final out from the military, right, like you sign all your papers, all this stuff, you don't even have your 214 yet, and like, there's not even a door handle on the other side of that door, most times, and it's sort of symbolic, like, man, I had to sort of like, okay, like realize, okay, sense of purpose, like this thing keeps going, this machine keeps turning, so that was a hard thing for me to deal with. I know
Yeah.
a lot of guys struggle with that sense of purpose when they get out, but there's always a way to pay it forward, you know.
Yep. No, 100%. The fact that you walk away from the military as somebody, as a senior NCO or officer or even just part of a squad,
Yeah.
everybody has somebody that looks up to you,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and you have that sense of urgency as a leader. You have that sense of responsibility from the military, and then when you, like you said, walk out that door,
Yeah.
it's all ripped from you. You lose that
Yeah.
identity. You're now
Yeah.
the nobody at some new company that doesn't give two craps about anybody. It's just
Oh yeah.
about making the company more money. And
Exactly.
you know, you get treated differently, people act differently. You learn real quick that it isn't truly a team, no matter how much they preach that we're a team. And it becomes tough, man. I think that's a big contributing factor to, how lost that some of the veterans get when they get out there, because there's no team, there's nobody else to rely on.
Yeah, yeah, I think, at the end of the day, we fight for each other, right? Like
Yep.
everybody's always asking the question, like, what do you guys fight for? Well, in the end, it's each other, and I know, like, I'm guilty of this too, like not keeping up with people that I promised to keep up with, and
Yep.
I think, but I still, at the end of the day, I have my 4 quarters versus like 100 pennies, right? As far as like my close circle goes with, especially, and how like special operations, everybody knows everybody, man. It's one big family, and
Yep.
even as a gunship guy, man, we were there. Our whole sole purpose was to make sure, guys like you got home, close air support, whatever the case may be. So,
Yep.
but like you said, when that's gone, man, it's a harsh reality,
It is, it's not, it's one of the things that I think the average civilian can't understand,
100%.
it may not be a great analogy or a great realistic, but trauma does bring people together.
Oh yeah.
Everybody that took a bite out of that shit sandwich,
Yeah.
became brothers and sisters after they did it.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's really hard for people to get. I also have found in the civilian world, the term leadership is not exactly the same as what it is in the military.
100%. Yep.
And
It's
so
there's management and there's leadership, and when you get out, you see more of the management side of the beans and bullets, right? But yeah, it's
yeah,
like you said, that transformative leadership is rare to see, even when you're in, and when somebody has that, they don't have to raise their voice, like you just know what they're saying without them saying. It's intuitive. They just have that presence, right?
yeah,
You don't see that when you get out that often. But.
yeah, you're right. I mean, 100%. And the thing is that, when people do go out and, like you said, you got help and it made you a better person, but that term help can be in a lot of different forms. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
every veteran goes through that same beginning process. They think that the only place that they can get help is the VA, right?
Yep. Yep.
They don't look at the nonprofit side, because most of the good nonprofits don't have the budget to advertise. It's all spent on the program.
Yep.
And then you've got, TRICARE. If you've retired and you can keep TRICARE, you can use that,
Yeah.
and so forth. But, realistically, that's the deciding factor right there. When you have that negative experience going through the VA, do you decide to end things and stop there, or do you look to find different help? And for me, that started in the form of podcasting.
Oh yeah.
I do use the VA. They give me my medicine and all that stuff. But what has helped me the most, it has been podcasting
That's
and
awesome.
talking about stories like this and everything else with like-minded people. I don't have to worry about the other person being on the other side judging me. They can relate. They
Oh yeah.
took that bite, and I think it's important. When you were in the Air Force and you were transitioning through these different MOSs, which one did you find to be the hardest?
The hardest I would say is when it was definitely the aero gunner or the special missions aviator side of things, but it was not necessarily when I was on gunships. But when I went to helicopters, man, I had to basically forget everything I thought I knew about flying. You even look at a helicopter, you're like, man, how does this thing fly? And so I had to basically, don't think gunship, think rescue helicopter, offensive to defensive. And there's just so much you have to know as on a HH-60 is like what they did was they combined the aero gunner with a flight engineer and made this Swiss Army knife in the sky, where you have to know systems inside and out, and really in the end, aero gunner is probably like 10% of that job now, because you're, deploying fast ropes for the PJs and you're doing all this other stuff, So I would just, the knowledge, the amount of studying you have to know before you get your check ride complete is insane, Like I told somebody the other day, like if I would have studied hard at anything, before I became a gunner, like as I did that, I would be like a doctor or something, It's just that level of, knowing your weapon systems inside and out, knowing your aircraft systems inside and out. So yeah, and then there was a physical part where I actually failed the dunker, which if you've been to that, they take this fuselage, they put it underwater, right? And they at the very last one, they smoke out your goggles, they blind, they get the blinding goggles on, and I could not find this handle, man, for the life of me, man. And so for whatever reason, man, by the grace of God, the SEER guy threw me a bone and was like, hey man, it's like, you're going to work with this guy for like a week and he's going to get you where you can pass this thing, And sure enough, by the time that guy was done with me, man, I felt like I could have taught it at that point, So just that being comfortable, being uncomfortable is a hard thing to get. But once you get that switch down, man, it's a beautiful thing,
Yep. Yeah. Dunker gets a lot of people on our side as well. Not an easy job, teaching that and just there's so many fears you got to get people over with first before you can even teach them how to get themselves out without panicking. And so I can relate. Yep, I can definitely relate.
Yeah, that water's the great equalizer, right? And I I think like and I'm a realist. I knew at that point, when I made the decision to get into special operations in some way, shape, or form as an aviator, like I realized, like man, like physically, I couldn't be an operator, like just a swimming alone. Yeah, I knew that, So I was like, well, the next best thing would be, to provide close air support for, those super ninjas on the ground, make sure they get home. And we took immense pride in that in the 16th, and that was always my why, man. And that why was so strong. Like there was a letter, from a Ranger, I think the 75th, and it's in the 16th. And right before you go up the stairs, and basically this guy's holding his daughter, right? And he's like, thank you for the, the gunship guys and the crew and for your close air support. I get to go home and, see my daughter, man. And that was always what it was about, 100%. That right there,
Yeah. I can vouch, not that I was, I may look old, but I was never in the Vietnam era war. And I think that's probably the one improvement that I can honestly say from our last war to all the way through these last 20 years is the close air support had improved immensely. Between the A-10s and everything else, I mean, they're laying rounds down really close to people, and
like 20 meters, a couple of stories where they go.
Yeah, it's
close,
insane.
man. Yeah.
In Vietnam, it was, hey, try to get under something. Here we come.
Yeah. And that goes to say something, we had this saying to where like, the guys on the ground on the rounds, right? But we on the switches, and like, there is those split seconds crew decisions you have to make, whether to get rounds out and, you get those danger close initials, you get clearance for it, there's still the pucker factor. Like, man, like, I hope they know what they're asking for, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you want to save them, so there is those split second decisions but more than likely we're going to shoot because you guys asked for it, but
yeah, absolutely, man. And it is awesome, watching, if anybody out there has ever gone through YouTube and just seen some of the training exercises and stuff that you can see on video, it is pretty impressive, the things that you guys can do. So my hat's off.
Thanks,
let's dig into a little bit about post-military, man. So you go through your career and you end up getting out. Did you retire or did you come out early or?
Yeah, I retired. I did 21.4 years. Okay. And one December, is when I actually officially retired. But even on terminal, I started working again, doing the flight simulator stuff here at Cannon Air Force Base, basically
Okay.
building the scenarios for the crews, taking, some of my past experiences or whatnot and throwing them on this virtual reality, if you will, on the simulator and making them some as realistic as I can,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And that's cool because it keeps you around like-minded people,
oh yeah,
the language, the humor and all of that is
yeah,
a different breed than what you're gonna find in the community.
yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
yeah,
I had an HR lady hand me a notebook and it said um, every page inside is the reason why HR likes me, and it's a blank um
yeah. Oh man, yeah, I know the film, man. Yeah, it's definitely. I've had to tone it back a lot, I guess, when I got out. As far as I mean, I really, the way I look at my whole career, man, I really did nothing too special. I told a lot of dick and fart jokes for 21.4 years, but
Yeah.
the humor side of it, that was a big part of being downrange, the pranks and all that stuff. And I
Oh
get
yeah.
into a little bit of those in the book. And, what was cool about the fire department is I learned a lot of those, I had this arsenal of pranks before I even became a gunner, and then if we weren't flying, man, somebody was getting pranked usually. So
Yeah. No, I can relate too, man. I know when I left my last unit, I took one of the mechanics' toolboxes and chained it up and took the overhead lift and stuck the button, taped the
yeah,
button down so it would go up, and then I taped the handle to his toolbox and
yeah,
up it went.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We used to do the standard, the common one was like you get like a Kool-Aid packet, right? Put it in somebody's boots while they're sleeping, when they slept, they'd have like, purple stuff come out of their boots or whatever, little things like
Yeah.
that. But just enough to be quite annoying, but not enough to tip them over. So
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, man. That's what I always explain to people. People ask what deployment's like, and I said it's a few moments of adrenaline and exercise and hours of boredom,
oh
you
yeah,
know. And it's the boredom that most people when they get in trouble over there, it's during the boredom time, not the adrenaline side,
yeah, very, very true. Yeah.
So you get out and you're working with the simulations and everything else. How was that experience since you were transitioning into a like-minded field?
It's really, man. I love it, man, because I still get to see some of the same guys I flew with, every now and then like you get to basically help train the future air commandos out here, man, and get them basically take your experiences and your lessons learned and war and stuff like that, and put them in this scenario to where everybody benefits and they learn from it, and best case scenario would be like somebody gets home and they're like, man, like thank you for that one scenario, man, that really helped me get through this moment downrange or whatever the case may be, and so you get to pay it forward. I guess pay it backwards would be the case in this instance. But yeah, I love it, man. It keeps me somewhat in the game still. You're not actually flying like I used to fly. I miss flying every day, but it's again, the next best thing, keeps me engaged and it gives
Yeah.
me somewhat still that sense of purpose we talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that transition, what did you find was the hardest? I know you said that you went and got some help. Was any of that due to the transitioning or?
Yeah, yeah. So my last year in the Air Force, man, like I talk about it a little bit in the book. So my last deployment, I went from basically from gunships to 60s back to gunships for my sunset tour. My last 2 years here, and I was on the AC-30 Whiskey, and then we went to Al-Asad, and it was so slow, man, and just quite frankly boring, that at that point. And then, I realized when I got back, man, that my why that is over. There's no reason, and then all that stuff, and then basically, I started drinking. What became a weekend drinking habit turned into like at least a pint, of some sort of liquor a night just to go to sleep, and it just escalated, man, and spiraled, and
Yeah.
I get to a point where my wife's like, either me or your daughter or the alcohol, you choose, and that's a hard thing to come to that realization, when you actually hear those words. And the most important conversation I ever had was the one I had, in that mirror with myself and Jesus. I'm a Christian, that night, and I end up actually talking to a preacher, man, as well, and he's like, life circumstances can make you bitter or better, and I chose better. And there were some other things happen, like I'd lost a lung, and a bunch of weird stuff happened, like physically.
Hmm.
But yeah, that, and then so I end up getting prolonged exposure because SOCOM has the was it the preservation of the force and family, like the MFLAC
Yep.
psychologist. I
Yep.
end up talking to her, and like I did the prolonged exposure treatment where like the whole idea behind that is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So like you write your story out, write it out again, to where you can talk about it and not like the first time I ever told her the story, I cried. She cried even.
Yep.
So basically, I did that. She's like, you should tell your story. You should tell your story. And I said no like 100 times, man. And once I finally got out, I could talk about it on that dust settles. I was like, you know what, maybe I can get this on paper. Maybe someone will get help if they read. Even one person gets help. That's a blessing. And that was
Yeah.
really why I wrote the book.
Yeah. Real similar, man. Actually, I wrote a book for my family. It wasn't designed to be published. It was more of a document. And, I realized after I got help, that part of my anger towards my family was because I hadn't looked inside myself and rationalized what happened. And after, I kind of associate it with, all the smoke gets blown away in front of your eyes and then
Yeah.
things become, visible. And that's when I realized, for the 68 months I was deployed, every time I came back, my wife would ask me, how things were. And I'd just say, fine. It literally, I trained her to think it became just another day at the job. And, I didn't realize it, but, my first deployment, my wife was in tears. My
Yeah.
last deployment, she rolled over, gave me a kiss and said, see you in a year, you know,
Yeah.
and that's how numb it had became over the years. And then when I got out, I was so bitter because I was struggling and nobody understood. Hell, I never told them, you know,
Yeah.
whenever I had bad dreams, I just say, I don't remember what it was or whatever. And I just kept them out of it and then expected them to understand, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's tough, man, because like, back to the 2 decades of war, right? Like most of us were in this era, and like we expect, for them to not think we're normal. At least I do. I expect the regular civilian populace to think, oh, he's not normal, man. He just wrapped up all this and that. But at
Mhm.
the same time, I feel like, if we don't tell these stories, they'll never know. And like you've got a great avenue podcasting, right? And whether it's writing an article, whatever the case may be, I believe every veteran has a story, man. Whatever, no matter how small, how big, I highly encourage the guys to write it out, man. Bleed it on the page, get it out, and you'll feel better because of it.
Yep. And I tell people the same thing. So when I wrote that document, I felt like it was time for me to tell my kids were older, they were all adults and had their own kids by this time. And I gave it to my family because I wanted them to know without me having a conversation. I still wasn't ready to try to justify things I did or things that I seen or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I gave it to him as a document. My daughter was the one that actually asked me to publish it, and
Yeah.
I did. Um, and surprisingly, just like you said, I didn't. I used to tell people, if you want my book, it's going to be next to melatonin at the pharmacy. You
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I got some good reviews from it, and there was some family members that said, "Hey, this book really helped me. I understand what my husband's going through right now because he won't talk to me."
Yeah,
And that's
that's the best reviews too. Is like when guys you flew with or worked with, right? Like they're like, man, like we finally got a gunship guy with a book out now. And like I had a realization the other day. Like as a gunner I used to fly with, and he's like, man, he's like, do you realize you published a book? He's like, you know how big that is? And to me, it still hasn't settled. But
yeah,
I guess in the end, man, like everybody should publish a book that's been in my opinion. But I think it does help, because back to my point about like when you die, man, there's no U-Haul behind a hearse. Like you can't take nothing with you, man. And like
yep,
in my mind, the only thing I can truly believe you leave behind is your legacy, how people remember you. And like Marcus Aurelius says, what you do in life echoes in eternity, and you should tell your story, so that way your great, 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 great grandson or granddaughter has something to know about you.
yeah. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Anybody that has looked at the news in the last 3 years should know, if they want people to understand their side of their
Yeah.
story, 30 years from now, they need to document it
Oh yeah.
because none of us know where we're going to be in 30 years. And none of us know what the teachers are going to teach about this war in 30 years from now. I mean, we just watched bases get renamed and statues get taken
Yep.
down and everything else. We maybe go from heroes to zeros in 30 years,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. And so I always tell people, the internet is permanent. Whatever's on there, like it or don't like it,
Yeah.
it can still be found.
100%.
And if you document your story in some way, then absolutely people are going to hear your story. Even if you don't feel comfortable doing that, like you said, I put my book down, I don't know how many times, because things were just getting difficult. And it wasn't difficult because I had to talk about them. It was difficult now because you write kind of in a outer body experience. You look at yourself about, okay, you're just now a character and I'm writing what you did. And then
Yeah.
you come to those points in your story where you say, man, what a dick, you know, and you're judging yourself on things that you did um, as an outer person.
Oh yeah.
And it becomes difficult, man. It really does. And it took some support groups. It took you know, dedication just to keep trying, if I can write half a chapter today, and that's where I struggled. It was difficult, and I didn't write a long book. It was 94 pages, I think, but I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, mine's a short one too. I think it's like 136 ish, but like a 2 hour like Sunday read, like somebody put it. But yeah, I think to your point that there is a very spiritual side to all of this.
Yep.
Man, I mean that's you ever just have like you wake up 3 a.m. on the dot for whatever reason, man, and like that's when like I would get this urge to drink, which would turn into really like my urge to write, and I started putting down the bottle more and more, started writing, and
Yep.
basically like I realized, man, like alcohol at that point, it stole everything from me and almost everything, if I was going to let it. And so what would happen was I'd get these emotional Charlotte's Web of words, right? And like I would somehow throw them on paper and try to make sense of all these words and what we've been through, these 2
Yeah.
decades and stuff. And hopefully there's some similarities when somebody reads it or whatever the case may be, but there is a very spiritual, like ego killing, like part of writing a book, when you see it from your outside looking in.
Yeah, I associate that where the old you gets
Yeah.
introduced to the new you. And that's where that bond becomes, because one of the struggles that you're describing is you're not able to love yourself.
Yep.
Whether it be that you think you're a failure as a husband because your family no longer understands you, whether it's substance abuse, gambling, my choice was alcohol as well. I
Yep.
drank because I couldn't sleep, you know,
Yep.
and to this day I've found that, now I don't necessarily need alcohol to sleep, but I do leave a TV on or something to break up that silence in the background.
Oh yeah.
And I'll get 4 or 5 hours here, and then I'll be up for a while and then lay back down, so forth. But I don't need the alcohol anymore to deal with that. And
Yeah.
I credit a lot of that to writing that book, because again, this is the old you that you remember getting introduced to the guy that you became without realizing
Yeah.
it. And so it's
100%.
when you were going through the book and you were writing your story, did you ever come to those spots where, and I'm sure you did, where you stopped and you just sat and you said, man, do I really want to continue this? Because it is not easy to write a book.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely to the point where I was on a Casaback. It was when I was on helicopters. It was June 8, 2018, and we'll say East Africa. But that moment, like I said, we saw the best side of combat search and rescue. Like we saved 5 lives, right? And then we lost 1 Eagle, 1 American passed away when we got him back to the operating table, and that to get the detail of all that on the page, man, it hurt, man. But after it was done, man, there was some closure, if you want to call it that, or whatever the case may be, and just help to get not just my story, but everyone else's story in that moment on paper,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because it'll live forever, you know?
Yeah,
Uh, and I think that is truly, amazing. You know, I got a lot of respect for anybody that can write a book. Um, I got one that's getting published now. It's a fiction book, and I discovered really quick though, even though I was writing about my life,
yeah,
writing a fiction book is so much easier. You
yeah.
know,
That's I've heard a lot of people get asked this that are authors, and like they're like, which one's harder, and they'll say fiction, but all those people are not veterans. You know what I mean? So I don't know if there's something there, man. But like I see where I get what you're saying. I really do, But that's
yeah,
just curious to how that is, But
yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is because inside you want to help, and a lot
oh
of
yeah,
times that feeling comes before the healing has fully came about, and so it is tough to
yeah,
talk about. This is it's real similar to that therapy that you went through. You're
yeah,
writing your story down and continuously writing it,
oh yeah,
and she the therapist I went to always would make me read it to her.
yep,
I would go home and have to write this story over and over and over again, and then read them to her when the next, and again, it started out with tears, and it did
yeah,
get to the point where I could get through it. I still
yeah,
hated it, but I could get through it. I think a lot of people just struggle with that. They have a hard time relating to it, and I
yeah,
get it. There's no broken leg, there's no person in a cast, and you don't see the injuries,
yeah,
but the effects are devastating.
100%, yeah. Yeah, I remember those. I exactly what you did, man. I would write it down at home, and then like I would write it down, and if I remember right, there was some sort of timing with it to where like basically like you would read it, then you would get faster and faster, or maybe I felt like it was getting faster because I didn't get to that point, man, where I'm going to break down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. And you also get to the point where you realize too that um you go from telling the story, and your first time it's like, I just want to get through this,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and you leave a lot of shit out. And
Oh
and
yeah,
then that next time that you write it, it becomes a little bit easier, and some of the details become a little bit more clear. And I noticed that about it too. Not necessarily like a lot of stuff, but little things that you could skip over to get through it. Your
yeah,
mind just would do it, and then
yeah.
they became clear, and you got them on paper. How long did it actually take you to get your book wrote?
I would say from like start to like finish to where it's like published like approximately 7 months, which is I guess relatively fast. But the thing was I had a lot of these words, down from the prolonged exposure and other things. There was just basically wasn't much of my upbringing and stuff like that, and growing up in Appalachia,
Mhm.
and the whole idea of like roots is where you come from, right? Like Appalachia, but you can have your roots and your wings, and wings, I get into flying, and if you're lucky, you get to touch the face of God type scenario. But yeah,
Yeah.
7 months. Yeah,
We got a guy on our. I have a nonprofit that's a radio station. One of the singers was a Coast Guard, and he flew.
yeah,
He flew a lot of missions, from down south back into the states, and I guess doing drug interdiction
yeah.
or something. But he wrote a lot of songs about southern skies and stuff like that. And man, he really laid it out of how it feels. You don't have to be on the battlefield for this war to touch you.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. And I think that's a lot of times it was with us. It was always a bird's eye view of whether it's a sensor or like even when I went to helicopters, it's very up close and personal. And
yeah,
yeah, it's very true. And I think aviators, we get to a point, man, where like we get put in those situations where we're like, do we keep leaning forward, get more in the fight, right, or do we get to the point where we have to pull out? There's that decision that has to get made at one point. I
yeah,
remember one, during that castovac, man, like we had already got our three guys on our helicopter for the first time we went in, and we went to a gun pattern, and I look back and the PJ's giving the guy a tracheotomy, right? And like it gets to the point where like, okay, golden hour, we got to get this guy back, but Trail's on the ground picking up their three guys, right? And then basically like, okay, we'll give one more gun run, and then we'll egress, and like hopefully they come with us. It came down to that split second, type decision that stays
yeah,
with you.
yeah. Yeah, that's another reason why I put zero relation to the way the civilians consider leadership to the
Yeah.
way we consider it, because our definition of leadership involves people's lives,
Oh yeah.
and it is it's not easy decisions, but it's something that will have to be made by just about every warrior on the battlefield at some
Oh
point
yeah.
in time. So you get into this book, right? And as you're going through it, you're laying it out. Did you do the editing process, or did you go through a publishing company?
Actually, what I did was, so I had everything. Well, at least what I thought was most of the book written, and then I went on LinkedIn. And I looked up something like editor for military, journal, something like that. And
Mhm.
then Holly McKay, an actual war journalist, she was on LinkedIn, and I messaged her. Within minutes, she messaged me back, and I had an appointment. And then we did the process of the Word document back and forth. And she did a really good job, man, of like getting those words out of me to make it make sense to me and to everyone else. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then once I got done with that, like she said, "Hey, I got a publisher named Robbie Grayson there at Trademarker Media," and she's like, "I can introduce you if you want." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And introduced me to him, and he did the cover, and really awesome job with the cover and a lot of other different things. And next thing you know, man, it's ironic, man. I read on the fifth grade level, and I got a book out. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the English teacher in my middle school pulled my wife in and told her, I'm not the kind of guy that you want to be hanging around with, because English I didn't give a shit about, and I wasn't a student very well, and ironically, like, I look
yeah,
at it the same way. Holy crap! And I got a book out there.
yeah,
I found that the editing process is brutal.
oh yeah,
That's the part that I dread about, because you reread your book so many times, man.
yeah,
And especially when we're talking about a book like this, because now
right,
you have to go back and relive it to get
yep.
through just the editing process in it. And it isn't easy.
Yeah,
You
that was the hard part when you do the final, like, like with your publisher, like the line by line, everybody goes through it right, and then like, you'll find small things here and there, but like,
Yeah.
then I started doing this thing, okay, like second guessing my words, like did I mean this or did I mean that? Is this did I paint that picture right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you almost have to set it and forget it, just pull the trigger on it, like you get to
Yep.
that point.
No, you're 100% right. And for me, it was dates and locations.
Yeah,
Total, I spent 68 months deployed, and I struggle with, was this year Iraq, was this year Afghanistan, and it was just because I was in and out so much, man.
oh yeah,
And sometimes, I'll get halfway through a story and I'll go, oh, wait a minute, no, this was Iraq, sorry,
yeah,
and
yeah. They do blend in.
yeah, they really do. Same color ground, that's for sure.
You know what's crazy, man, is like we were in like Bagram. I was on the whiskey gunship at that point, and I remember like hearing people scuffling down the hallway, and like they literally woke one crew up. I think it was like end of 2014 ish or something like that, and like one of the crews went to do the ISIS thing. Like basically, they woke everybody up that moment in Bagram, and took that crew to the ISIS fight, and then all that kicked off, and then that was our primary. So
Yeah. Yeah, I did many days of Bagram, walking
yeah.
down old Disney Avenue with your hand like this. The only
Yeah.
place in combat you're gonna salute.
Yeah, that was a weird thing, man. Because we would get alerted for like a tick, right, or something like that,
Yep.
and like there would be people like doing like running on Disney like 5Ks with reflective belts on. I was always thought, man, that's sort of defeats the purpose, man. Why are you wearing that right here? So
Yep. Yeah, no,
it,
I completely agree, man. That place became contractor heaven, and
oh
you
yeah,
know, last time I was in Bagram, you could have a pizza delivered to your hooch. Yeah.
yeah. I remember that. Yeah, we had that. We had the green beam.
Yep.
You had to be careful with that, man. You get dysentery, man. I remember that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
100%. Yeah. We came a long ways from barrels and stirring shit to delivering pizzas. That's for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, my first, like I said, my first deployment was to Kandahar. It was
yeah.
in 2002, like February, and it's a weird place, man. You can see some winter, and you'll be wearing a jacket, and it'll be 80 degrees outside.
Yeah, man. We used to. I remember build snowman and bargain man in the winter. Like,
Yeah.
we'd use the 40 mil cases for different appendages for the snowman and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. That goes along with the hours of boredom, huh?
Oh yeah. And you remember those plywood huts we'd live in?
Yep.
You'd see them dung beetles start drilling above you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, being in the desert and looking up at the mountains and still seeing snow in April.
Yeah. That was wild. Yeah.
It was weird, man. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it does all come back to, regardless of what format you use, documenting your story and letting people know your side that can be permanent is crucial.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, I think one of the problems that we had in combat, to be honest, was we've never really fought a true urban war. You
Yep.
know, um, maybe in Vietnam there was times, or maybe in World War II there was times, but those were all different periods, and the
Yeah.
way war is fought today is completely different. So if nothing else, your stories and other people's stories, these are all places that may give some people some context of what a true urban war fighting war, how it was fought, and tactics that may keep them
Yeah.
alive. Like, you know, giving permission to shoot a bomber that's standing outside your gate right before people are leaving for good,
Yeah. Yeah.
may be a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, we just made so many mistakes, man, and those are the true um negativity of having a 20-year war.
Yeah.
Your leaders that have experience retire, they get burned out, and the young upcomers are promoted so fast that they don't have the
Yeah.
life experiences, and and I really do think that's what led up to the way we left out. Was our officer corps was promoted fast, our NCO corps was promoted fast, and that's all your leadership right there. You're seeing first sergeants with 15 years in, you know.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, that was you know, I just remember that, watching that on TV. I think I was on terminal leave when the withdrawal happened, watching that, man, and just like, it's one of those things where you like you, right? You spend half your adult life in this place, right? And then you see that, man, it's like I have to believe that what we did mattered, man.
Yeah,
Like all the blood on that soul, man, that we've left, and like I have to believe that their lives meant something for that place in some way,
yeah.
shape, or form. The better.
Well,
But yeah,
like you talked about earlier about Al Assad, you
yeah,
know, I was our main company was in Al Assad, and I was in a glorious vacation hole called Ramadi. And
yeah,
I just remember when I would have to go back to deal with the company commanders of the first sergeants for whatever reason. Um, I always said, man, Al Assad, there ain't no way you're never gonna attack Al Assad. The perimeter is like 4 miles outside,
yeah,
before you even get to the inner perimeter. And then you got the outer perimeter that's even further out there.
oh yeah,
And, then like shortly after I got out and we were, downsizing Iraq, I seen Al Assad got taken over. And I was
yeah,
like, what the heck? How does that happen, man?
yeah,
You know, but
yeah. It
yeah.
was it was weird, like because I'd been to Iraq as was it Balad as a firefighter, and
Mhm.
then I became a gunner. Then I did Afghanistan after Afghanistan, and multiples. And then the ISIS thing kicked off, and it was weird, man, because we were doing like a lot of there's some JTAC in a talk with a general, right, and like clearing us on to shoot things. And at this point, we were turned into like a bomb truck where like you had Griffins, STBs, and stuff like that, and basically you got a guy in a Type 3 control, and like, yeah, ISIS was dumb at first, man. I mean, they'd go to these four-way intersections and do this flag, and we'd blow the shit out of them, man, and then they got smart. But yeah, it was
Yep.
that was weird going back there, I guess, on a offensive type platform.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, man. The war changed so much, but I
Oh
guess
yeah.
you'd have to expect that with, two
Yeah.
generations worth of fighting
Yeah.
going on. I guess things are going to change,
Oh
but
yeah.
it is very interesting, and I love having people like you on that are documenting their version, because what you've seen, I may not have seen, and it does help put the puzzle together. Um, this war was huge. There was a lot of different soils that things happened on.
Oh
Some of
yeah.
these outposts that people were on that nobody else was there but 20 people.
Yep.
And nobody would know their story if they didn't document it. It was just literally nobody else there.
For sure. Yeah.
And so I think my hat's off to you, man, for doing what you're doing. You're doing amazing things, and whether somebody puts a review out that says, "Man, you saved my life," or "Man, I can completely relate." All of those are still lifelines that say, "Hey, I'm not alone. There's somebody else out there that felt the same way I did. This
For
is
sure.
normal. It's not unnormal. I'm
Yeah. And
not
that's
broken."
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, man. And I thank you for what you do, and your platform. I watched your last episode where you guys get into the ayahuasca stuff, and I know that's a whole different conversation, man. But
Yeah.
appreciate what you do, man, and telling these stories, man. So and helping people tell those stories. So
Yeah, no, I love doing it, man. I get more out of it than I think anybody else does because I am selective kind of on the guests that I bring on, and I try to, as much as possible, stay away from people that are promoting just products.
oh yeah, yeah,
I have a dear spot in my heart for authors, so I never turn down an author because I know nobody's out there writing books to get rich. That's for sure. So
yeah. So somebody told me the other day they were like, God bless authors, man. It's
yeah,
few and far between these days, right? So
it is.
yeah.
I love writing because it is peaceful.
Oh yeah.
I used to write for a veteran magazine, and I love doing it, man. You know,
Yeah,
um,
the more I do it, the more I love it. I've noticed that, and the more comfortable I get doing it. You know what I mean? Like
yep,
anything, I guess repetition. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, man. When you paint a picture with your words, man, and you get other people to see that picture for what it is.
yeah, yeah, 100%, man. Um, just out, I know we hadn't said it. What is the title of your book?
Yeah, so it's a Moonchild, the roots and wings of a U.S. Air Force Combat Special Missions Aviator. And it starts out with the poem there, "Stay a While, Moonchild" by Rita Clint. And I talk about, sort of growing up being infatuated with the moon and how the moon, lit up the whole mountains and stuff like that, the terrain, tracer fire, stuff like that. And then I get into, my roots, where I'm from, and my wings to where the Air Force let me go. So
Okay, yeah. Has it already been printed and
yeah,
out?
yeah. It came out April 7th, my birthday. The title looks like that right there.
Okay,
And on the back of it has me, my mask and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a
man, they did
short
a good
read,
job.
but it's like a probably 2 hour read, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely, man. And I will make sure that, when we do the whole release, that I'll have all the links and everything so they can get your book and everything else. But
Thank you.
man, he did do an awesome job on your cover. That looked really good.
Yeah. He's a very talented person, man. It was working with him and Holly was an awesome experience, So
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. So I'm gonna give you that chance. I'm gonna bring you forward, man, and give you that opportunity to tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can find your books, and where they can learn what else you're up to.
okay. Yeah, so you can find my debut book, Moonchild, looks like this on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere they sell books there. I know Trademarker Media has a link for whatever country into the Amazon part of it. And also, there's a Facebook page called Moonchild. It's basically a picture of me and my MVGs looking out a window. And then I have a Instagram page called Marco_Brolo21. So that's where you can follow me and hopefully enjoy the read. So
All right, man. Hey, brother, I appreciate you coming on, and more importantly, I appreciate you documenting your story and sharing it with us.
well, Donna, I really appreciate you having me, man. It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you.
All right. I hope all of y'all got something out of this, and I hope all the listeners out there go over and give him a follow and purchase his book because I can tell just from this little 50-minute interview that we did, man, there's going to be a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of lessons learned, and a lot of life experiences. If you really wanted to know that side of it and how veterans feel, there's your opportunity. So I hope all of y'all take care. Remember, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick the day's ass.